Hogue. I am the recently elected chair, or appointed chair by the City Council of the TIRZ Board. So I'll call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum present, and we'll have some members joining us after we begin, but we'll go ahead and get the meeting started. The first item on the agenda is we have to elect a vice chair. As I stated, the City Council named me to serve as chair of the TIRZ Board after Mr. Cummings finished his term. And so now we need to have a vice chair appointed who can sit and preside over the meetings in the event that I'm not able to be there. So I'll just kind of open it to the floor on.
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Greg Gaylor.
Greg Gaylor's been nominated. Are there any other nominations? And I don't think we need a second for nominations, do we?
No, we don't. I'm moving to elect Greg by acclamation.
Well, let's ask Greg if he's willing to serve as vice chair. Will you be willing to serve, Greg?
I can.
Okay. All right, then we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of naming Greg Gaylor as vice chair of the TIRZ Boards, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations by acclamation. The next item on the agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone who has a comment they want to make before the board that is not on the regular agenda. If you have something you want to comment about that's on the regular agenda, please hold your comments until we call that item, and you can make a comment at that time. If there are any other public comments that anyone wants to make at this time, this is your opportunity to do so. No one's approaching the lectern, so we'll move on to item number 4. Consideration of approving the minutes from the October 4th, 2022 TIRZ Board meeting. You should have all received in the packet that was submitted to you the minutes for the meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those? All right. They were emailed to everyone, and then also I think there were copies of the minutes in the back available if anyone needs those to review. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes as submitted?
Move approval.
Okay. Motion's been made to approve the minutes as submitted. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Second by Jason. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. And the motion carries. Minutes are approved. I'm hereby signing the minutes. All right. Moving on to item number 5, financial report.
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. This will be fairly brief. This basically looks very similar, if not the same as last time. I will note that we have not yet received the numbers for the current fiscal year. October 1st starts our new fiscal year. And so you see that beginning zone balance of $644,000. That's actually a year ago, October 1st. With your next month's report, we will have the numbers for the estimated revenue for the current year. Those numbers just have not come in yet. And so hopefully this time next month, we will have that the new revenue amount, which basically will tell us how much we have available for projects and incentive programs.
Did you talk to the tax office?
I have not. We get that information from our finance department.
Did you talk to the finance office?
Yes, we get the financial report from them. We get this one. We got it
How come
about a week
this
ago.
is the third week in October, we can't get that information quicker?
That's a good question. We get that when they send it to us. They send it to us when they get it from the
Michael,
appraisal
do you
district.
know the reason why we can't get it from the tax office quicker? Michael Dane?
What information are you wanting quicker? The breakdown of
Yes,
north
sir.
and south tiers?
Yes, sir.
No, I don't. Tina'd have to help us with that.
Who didn't?
The finance director would have to help us with that.
I mean, does the tax office have that information shortly after the 1st of October?
I don't know when they have that.
Does anybody ask?
I don't know.
It might be nice if we'd had a little more time to report. That's all I'm saying.
Is there anything about that that's going to impact anything we're going to take up today, John?
Not really. I mean, only that you are considering a couple of items that would be fairly large expenditures. It is
Okay.
pretty typical that this number does not change a whole lot. So, for example, you see that property tax revenue last year of $437,000. We would expect that to be in the ballpark for this year, probably a little higher. Valuations have gone up. But it wouldn't be, at least historically, that number has not changed a whole lot from year to year.
How long does it, I'm sorry, you have a question?
Do you think we'll have it by next month?
We should have it. Typically, we would have that information from the appraisal district by a
John, I'm
month
not
from now.
fussing, but you're gonna ask this board in a minute to consider spending $3 million over a period of time. And we don't have finite information financially on what's gonna happen. That would be nice if we could push this thing somehow so that when we can make intelligent decisions, see how much money we're gonna have and how much we're gonna have to allocate.
Sure. And like I said, I'll go on to the north area. Again, last year, the revenue was about $705,000. Again, we would expect that to be fairly close. And so as you'll see on that upcoming item, we've estimated that to be $700,000. So if you choose to make your decision based on that, and that number is higher, obviously that just gives more funds to work with.
How long does
But I think that's a fair point. I'm sorry, John.
was going to say, in past years, how long does it usually take us to get that updated information?
I believe we've had it, again, this is the September 30th report,
Okay.
so it's the report as of the end of the fiscal year. The next report should be the October 31st report, which should have that information. Again, we will definitely check on that between now and then.
Okay.
If we have it from the appraisal district, we will definitely have it. Let me say it a different way. The only reason you wouldn't see it next month is if the city has not received that information. And if we haven't, we will check about a week before the meeting to see if it's possible to get it, if we have not yet.
Well, it is better to have the current information, obviously. If there's something going on that it's taking longer to get that than it typically takes, I mean, we do need to address that. But my understanding is that the numbers that you're talking about don't change significantly from year to year.
That's correct, and these numbers are typically a month behind, so we're
Okay.
reporting, in other words, this is not unusual for us to be reporting the month-end numbers as of the previous month.
Okay, I remember that. Are there any other questions, or do you want to go over anything further on the financial report?
Unless you have questions,
I have a question. Where do we invest our money that we get such a little return on it, on $2 million in a year?
that would be a question for the finance department. I don't know if Michael knows the answer to that, or.
Michael went to visit with somebody else.
Okay,
I think we're restricted on where we can invest it at. So I
I'm
think.
sure
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
limited
the
where we
city
can.
has guidelines that they have to abide by, and y'all's money isn't any different from the rest of that. So I don't want to get into that because I'm not a finance person, but
Okay.
we can get them to come give y'all a report on that if you'd like it.
Okay.
That'd be good.
Any other questions? All right, the finance report has been received. I don't believe that requires any action from the board to approve. Next item on the agenda was for a request from Mr. Brown, an update on the status of the 4th Street project.
and I'll give a kind of a brief overview, but we have folks here from Public Works who can probably give more detail or answer questions if you have them. I just have a few graphic slides here. You can see here the scope of the project that you all had asked us to look at was from Chadburn here on the east all the way over to, I think that's MLK on the west. And you can see, it's a little hard to see from this, you see the red is the right-of-way. And so one of the issues is city owns right-of-way in this area. You can see there are a couple little pieces where the road actually extends into private property there and right there. But at this point, city ownership of that right-of-way ends, and the remainder of what is 4th Street is on private property. And so that's one of the issues that we had brought up with the board in terms of moving forward with a 4th Street improvement project, which you all had said you'd be willing to put some TIRZ money towards. We're still working out those ownership issues and trying to acquire the necessary right-of-way for that. This just shows, in purple, you can see the different ownership. I think there's a better graphic of that. I know this is hard to read, but this shows the individual properties and who owns each of those properties. As I think we've discussed, our records show that much of that 4th Street property is owned by the state of Texas. Although Mr. Pfluger, Lee Pfluger, believes that he is the owner of most of that, having purchased it from the state years ago. And that's part of the issue we've been having, is resolving that ownership issue. If the city wants to go buy it from someone, we have to know who to buy it from, and our real estate folks are still working through that.
And the 4th Street, that's on the north side, is that correct?
It's technically in the north.
So they would
Yeah.
get the funding from the north?
That's right,
Okay, yeah.
yeah. I think we may have one.
And,
I have a question.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Since it's been open on the ground for years, I have a question for the attorney. Is it not by prescription, public property?
That's kind of a law I'd have to dig into to give you an exact answer. I'm not sure, especially if there's some information that Mr. Pfluger maybe bought it, why those property rights haven't been transferred after such a purchase. I don't know. I'd have to.
But the actual pavement exists all the way through. And that's been that way for a long, long time.
You can't get prescription.
Huh?
You can't get prescriptive rights against the state, though, if it's state ownership.
No, but if it is state property already, then it's already open on the ground, John, Mark. It's already open on the ground, and it's by public right of way.
and
Well, it's something that will need to be looked into. My question is, and I'm trying to recall when we started talking about this, the business development reason for this particular project,
you mean why
to
would,
benefit the tiers for business. I mean,
Yeah, I'm sorry, can someone bring me up to date?
Yeah.
I don't know where, I'm
yeah,
fairly new
this,
here.
this was initiated
Yeah,
by.
long time ago.
By TIRZ board members. This was not initiated by the city. And so it was suggested that this would be a good use of North funds, given that we have substantial funds available, that would be a project to improve that street that would be beneficial to that area and help spur development.
is that dedicated city street? It looks almost like an alley.
It is considered a
front?
street.
Okay.
It's not an alley, but you're right. I think that's part of the reason it was suggested that it could be or should be improved, is that it's fairly narrow, and widening that street and resurfacing it would be a good project to do. It's not high on the city's list of projects, and that's why this board had suggested that we look into it further of using
Okay.
TIRZ funds to do that.
John, the genesis for this is we've spent,
Mr. Brown, Tony spoke for you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm
What was
sorry.
Yeah,
that?
Tony, you had a question.
Yeah.
Businesses are on that street?
That's a good question. We have not counted those. You can see there a number of buildings. Some of them are vacant. Many of them do have existing businesses in them.
Is this where Hartman Roofing's at?
Yeah, they are right there on the corner, there at Chadburn and kind of in this area. You all may recall that you all have given TIRZ incentive funds to a project right in here.
Okay,
Improvements going to that building as well.
I recall that. Steve, you said,
well, the genesis, we've spent a bunch of money on that street, TIRZ money, and we're trying to enhance it to encourage additional growth as well as provide an access that's reasonable now.
That's right. And that question of prescriptive did come up in previous discussions, and Mr. Hoag's answer was the answer that we kind of came up with at that time. If, as our records show, it's owned by the state, then that creates a wrinkle. I think city staff having spoken with both Mr. Pfluger and TxDOT, it seems that everybody is amenable to resolving this. It's just the wheels turn slow with that process.
Can TxDOT quit claiming?
Well, that's harder than you might think. That involves Austin, and it's not something the local TxDOT folks can do. I think the short answer is they don't seem to care too much, and so they might be willing to do that, but they also don't care so much that they're willing to step out and actually make it happen. I think we've made progress from the last time we talked about this. I know Amanda in real estate has talked with both Mr. Pfluger and TxDOT, and I think Mr. Kelton from Public Works has as well. And so I think we're moving towards a resolution. It's just going slower than we all would hope.
Okay, tell me what the staff's recommendation is. How do we proceed with this project?
Has there been any application for this to be done by anybody, or is this strictly from the board?
No, this was strictly raised from
It's
the
board initiated.
Okay, so no businesses have come forward
several
with
years ago.
a desire for us to do this?
And
That's correct.
And as Mr. James indicated, I mean, it is an issue for the city, but it's not high on the city's priority list. And so the motive, I think, was from, in prior years, was to have the TIRZ Board look at whether it could fund that as a part of as part of its funds and a way to use funds from the North Zone for the betterment of that area.
Right.
I don't believe that doesn't tie in with any of the other improvements and stuff we were going to be talking about later.
No, but
It's a separate deal.
back to Mr. Brown's question, we have been moving forward, and I think we're getting closer to a resolution on the property issues. But in the meantime, our public works staff has done some of this research and even, sort of sketched out what an improvement project would look like. And so once we resolve those property ownership issues, and then we should be pretty close to ready to move forward with the actual project.
Well, and just to be clear, a project hasn't been approved.
Absolutely.
And,
We don't have cost
and we haven't funded anything. This is just kind of a concept idea that has been kicked around for a few years here at the TIRZ Board.
Right, and so I think for our own reasons, the city is hoping to resolve those ownership issues. Once that happens, we can come back to the board with an official, do you authorize funding or not for the project? And at that point, and Shane's here, and he maybe can answer more. I don't know if they've done cost estimates yet or not, but at the time, obviously, we come back to you for an actual authorization, we would have a much better estimate of cost for something like this.
How wide is the street, the pavement proposed here?
I'm going to defer to Shane on that.
Shane?
40 foot.
40 feet for the record is what
All the
he
way through?
said.
Yes, sir.
I think it would probably be beneficial for us, unless there's any disagreement, just as the project's going on, if we could have kind of just a regular update. I don't know that we need an update every meeting, but maybe every quarter, just so we can have some progress on where it is and when we expect we might have some answers.
Sure.
If it's going to go forward or not. I mean, this is one of those things we either need to, to put to bed and do, or move on
Yeah, I
and start
agree.
and focusing on other things.
Yeah.
I have a question of Shane. Do you have an estimated, just construction cost, Shane?
No, sir, we haven't started putting those numbers together yet. We got
But you're talking about curb and gutter 40 feet wide, all the way through.
curb and gutter. In this situation right here, we would probably use more of a lay down, not a stand-up curb, just simply due to the businesses that are there with the moving company, the Hartman Roofing, those type of things, where you have a lot of shipment and docking, so we would probably prefer a lay-down curb in this area. But yes, full standard construction.
One question, which is unrelated to this specific project, but is if we do this project, are there other streets in the area that are similarly situated that we're gonna start having requests to address those as well?
I'm not gonna say that you won't have a request to
Yeah.
do some improvements, but this one right here is the most unique in how it lines up between the warehouses, the narrowness of it, the widths of it. And there are some pinch points. Again, this is just a conceptual layout to where you can look at basically two 15-foot drive lanes and one 20-foot unloading lane based on the businesses, based on the proximity, because there is a huge pinch point right here. Right there. There is a huge pinch point right there. Because our layout right there, the initial layout right there has the pavement within 5 to 6 feet of the edge of the building. That's not, that's not necessarily doable. So there's going to be some, massaging of the design to try to accommodate for those pinch points and some of those other issues.
Okay.
Probably unloading, docking, things like that. We'll have to make some adjustments in those areas as well too. But this does show you kind of the property that we would have to, one, try to acquire, re-fence, rework through there as we work through the process and of the project, and kind of it helps us to understand as we start moving into the next phase of getting an opinion of probable cost of what this project would be. Kind of it helps us understand all of those things, but it does kind of give you an outline of what this would look like and what we can do with it as we're moving forward to actually hopefully free up that traffic. I know there is quite a bit of congestion right there from Hartman over into the moving company as well, so.
Is there do we have any kind of, and I hate to even ask this question, but I mean, do we have any kind of ETA supposedly when we might be looking at having the title issues resolved or worked out, when that could even happen?
Yeah, I know I've been working with Manda not only on this project, but also on, in its TXDOT rail division is the one we're having to work through, because this was actually part of the rail side of things back in the day, not necessarily TXDOT transportation. So we've been working with them as we're going through, and I'm working on some other property right there in the hard S curve of Chadburn, along with that drain that runs down the side of Fifth Street all the way down back over towards Oaks and even towards Magdalene. So been working on some of those property issues in these. A lot of times when we get into this, they do, and to your point, Stephen, that, when they just do a quick claim, that's not the indication I'm getting, so.
You don't have anything with a quick claim.
Yeah,
So.
and so I'm not getting that indication. They want meets and bounds, and they want actually their right-of-way division to assess it, to see what the property's value actually is, so. But, we are moving forward. Again, it is very slow going with, because not only do we have to go through TXDOT rail, we then have to go from TXDOT rail to their right-of-way, management division as well, so. It's just a slow process.
If we could just,
Thank you, Shane.
if we could just have this calendar like once every 3 months to get a brief update, even if there's no real movement, just so that the board can be apprised of how it's proceeding, and then.
Mr. Chairman, I may bring it up quicker than that. Okay?
I'm sure you always can.
Okay.
And there's also, of course, that doesn't prohibit any TIRZ board member from asking for an update in between either.
Sure,
So,
absolutely.
is there anything else on the 4th Street project?
No, nothing that I had, no.
All right. Next item is discussion item. We were talking about with some of the recent meetings that have been held, public meetings. Anyway, the item is discussion item on additional public input opportunities for use of North TIRZ funds. I just didn't want to let the efforts that have been done recently by the mayor and others to promote the North TIRZ, and I think Tony was particularly interested in this issue of what are we doing and what can be done in addition to promote the use of the North TIRZ funds educating people in the community, things of that nature, or other projects. And I don't know if anyone has any. John, did you have any comments on that, or?
Not particularly. I will go ahead, since this is the item of discussion, I was going to present this in the director's report. But with some recent staffing changes, we've shifted how the TIRZ process is going to be managed. As you may know, that a portion of it is in Planning and Development Services, a portion and a staff member in Economic Development also assisted with TIRZ. Now that's going to be moved back to Planning and Development Services. And so that's changing a little bit the way we do things. One piece of that is that downtown San Angelo is contracted with the city to do a number of things. And one of the things that they're going to be doing is some of the outreach kinds of efforts. And, you know, going out and encouraging applications for TIRZ. And so I suspect they will have heavy involvement in any sort of public participation, town hall type things, if we move forward with that kind of outreach effort.
Well, I guess, and Tony, did you want to chime in on this, or because you had spoken to me about it?
So is there any actual plans in hosting events, public hearings, somewhere in the north end of town to where people get intimidated by coming to City Hall?
Right.
You know, I've been told, well, they can come to City Hall, look at the application process. And a lot of these small businesses, first of all, you put any kind of application, thank you. You put any kind of application in front of them, that's probably in English, not both in English, Spanish.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that come in the way of the application process. So my thoughts and those of the business community in the north end that have reached out to me is, can we have some kind of forum placed to where they come in and actually show us an application that's not as intimidating, see if we qualify, what are the rules on those applications, and have that posted to where we can reach out either by mail or by person to those small businesses that are out there that would qualify to use those funds. So we can generate some applications and some interest, and the purpose of the program to beautify and get those streets cleaned up and those buildings back in a place to where we can do some real good with it.
Yeah, we don't have anything currently planned, but I think that's part of this discussion is exactly looking for input just like that. And so I think we can look at having something like that, particularly, as you know, in the north, applications can be submitted at any time. So there's no real timeline that has to be on. In the south, the application window is open right now. In the future, it might be ideal to have something like that just before the application cycle opens in the south, just because that's a narrow time window. But that's not to say we have to wait until next year to do that. We could have something like that in the near term for the north, particularly.
The City Downtown Association would be the main contact. Could they partner up? I know that the Ministerial Alliance had an interest of participating in getting people, sending out people door to door and for invitation once something is planned.
Well, you know, Tony, it's up to the people too. I mean, I don't think they should be intimidated. I mean, if you're asking for $75,000, I mean, you're going to want to learn, you're going to want to know. I mean, you're going to go up and go to that organization yourself and say, hey, help me do this. I mean, we sent out pamphlets before. I mean, there's you know, I understand there's a process and stuff, and you know, we do need help on making it understanding more black and white the application. But at the end of the day, it's up to the actual people who are asking for money to get it down. I mean, there's only so much we can do to hold their hand and guide them there.
And I agree that there's going to be the self-initiative, but in the past, they've had experiences where they've come up to City Hall and for whatever purpose it is, and they have that mystique or, that feeling that they're not there to help, So I'm not gonna apply. So why not,
Yeah.
Why would we not want to do this?
Well,
We're not getting any traction right now, so by doing something to that effect, I think it would be worth the time and effort to
Would you
see if
think
we
with
could get more
downtown San Angelo with Dell and Monica kind of assisting that'll be less intimidating and it'll be someone that they can, go to, that'll be a little more,
Exactly.
I
maybe
think
open
that-
and helpful?
Yes, I
I
think
mean, I
that's
do.
very helpful. I'm glad Downtown Association is stepping up to do
Well,
that, to help us.
That would be great, so we can.
What I've observed in my time on the board is, we'll go for a long time without really any sort of effort to promote it, particularly in the north. Of course, the south, we've always got more applications than we have money. But in the north, it goes on for quite a long period of time. There's not much attention paid to it, and then something comes up, and all of a sudden, that we want to have town hall meetings, we want to try to encourage people to do it. I think what I would be interested in is having some discussion or recommendations as far as what we could do to be more intentional about that. And I don't know whether that's advertising, I don't know whether it's pamphlets, I don't know what it is, and how you would do that, to try to promote and educate that these funds are available to businesses. When we have the town hall meetings, most of the people that show up at them seem to be people that already know about it, or that are involved. But, and of course, that's part of what we want to use these funds for, is for the businesses to invest in their own properties, to increase the taxable value of their properties, to
Exactly.
benefit the community as large. So that's kind of more what I was thinking, but I'm open to suggestions. And
I know once, at least once, maybe twice over the years, y'all sent out a really nice flyer to the north, and I know that's got some interest. That would get people in there that, hey, these funds are available if you want to fix the outside of your building and stuff, which is what this is all about,
Right.
and raise the value. But maybe it's time to do that again.
We did recently revise those, and I can't remember if we translated them, but I think we had looked at that. So that's something we could do as well, especially given the input we received from those town halls was that there's a lot of businesses with Spanish-only speaking owners. So I think that would be helpful. And the last time we went door to door distributing those, we did get more applications that next cycle. So I think that could be
But if we
helpful as well.
updated it and mentioned some of the ones that we have helped and do some things that have made a big difference, and, we could list several projects in the last 5 years that we've made a difference in, I think it would get some attention in the north.
Western Skies was a great project, that they revised that restaurant, the paving, the outside facade. Maybe Yolanda can do a little.
I think what I'm thinking, though, is we need to have something that's not just ad hoc, that we do it from time to time. It needs to be part of whatever, the city does great at its marketing. I don't know what needs to be done for this type of product that we're trying to push for the city, but there needs to be some sort of plan in place that, how much money we're gonna spend and what we're gonna do to promote it.
That's the toughest riddle with the north.
I know.
They have all that money, but they don't want to spend it, and no one wants to step up to fix their buildings.
Well, and the problem is, sending it out once is not enough, I'm not an advertiser, but I know you've got to keep the message out there if you really want to try to promote it, particularly in the north. I'm not as concerned about the south, because there's so much developed there. So if y'all could work on that and come back to us with some suggestions, and get input from Tony.
Oh, that's.
All right, any other?
I
Comments on
I
that?
think we'd lean on Dell and Monica too on some of their suggestions for it. If they're gonna help with this, I think, we can use them as well and see if they have any ideas for that.
Yep. All right, so we'll move on to item number 8, which is consideration of recommending funding for a North Chadbourne Street project in the approximate amount of $3,132,900, funded out of TIRZ North funds over a period of multiple years to include sidewalks, decorative street, and pedestrian lighting, signal upgrade, and engineering and design services. Mr. James.
I'm going to briefly go over this since we've talked about it a couple of times now. This is kind of an overview of the proposal. The funding, let me go back a second, the total project would be about $3 million. What our proposal was to take $1 million from that $2 million that's out there right now. So that would pay for $1 million of it, and then the remainder would come from $350,000 a year for 6 years, which, as I said earlier, is about half of the anticipated revenue each year. That would get us close to that $3 million project cost. With that, I would really just answer any questions, and again, Shane Kelton from Public Works is here. They're the ones who put together this cost estimate, and I know you all had some questions that I wasn't able to answer last time about the scope of it. What does it include? What is it going to look like? Those sorts of things.
I think one of the questions that was raised by the board last time was particularly more towards the maintenance costs and the ongoing maintenance, because I think in the estimate it had various, a truck and various equipment that was going to be purchased. There's a question about how that goes in with regular city maintenance,
and that's actually our next item. I'm sorry. So
that's the next one.
Yeah, this is
okay.
this is the item for the North
My
Chadburn
mistake.
Street Improvement Project. Basically carrying a street improvement project up on the north. And I think, as I clarified last time, typically this board has not funded street projects, although we've done a couple, and 4th Street's an example where we're considering one. Typically, this board has liked to fund more of a streetscape, other kinds of improvements, leaving the actual pavement improvements to the normal city capital improvement process. And so this is largely for decorative street lighting, sidewalks, those kinds of things. And as we talked about last time, the traffic signal, that's kind of in a gray area. I think you all had raised some concerns about maybe pulling that out as something that should be funded through the normal, as part of the street project, rather than this. But again, those are the kinds of questions I think Shane's here to answer if you have details. It came up last time. We do have some conceptual designs that were prepared years ago. But again, I don't know that those were used at all to come up with this.
And remind us again where this extends from. This goes further north from the improvements that have already been made there around Texas.
Yeah, and again, I think Shane can maybe answer that better than I can, but I believe it's.
The decorative street lighting would extend from 6th Street to 18th Street, where the TIRZ had, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, whenever it was, did the work there on 19th Street and Chadburn. Around to the Texas Bank. The decorative street lighting would, Texas Bank. It would extend up to those those lights, decorative lights that are already placed there. The lighting would extend to there, but the sidewalks would extend all the way to 29th Street.
Okay.
And again, in the decorative street lighting is
the decorative street lighting
is really expensive. And one of the things that drives its cost up is all the existing sidewalk that was put in there in with the Freedom Grant, that the sidewalks were placed basically from 14th to 6th Street on both sides, and then on the east side, it was the sidewalk was replaced all the way up to 18th Street to tie into the 19th Street sidewalks through a Freedom Grant.
And
I
how
guess that
far?
was probably 8 years or so ago. So the sidewalk there is not that old, and of course that's the sidewalk with the Freedom Grant with the reddish brick pavers that you see around it, decorative brick pavers kind of around it in places. That was all put in with the Freedom Grant. And instead of ripping all of that stuff out and starting over from scratch, the thought was to try to leave that sidewalk there and try to work to place these decorative lightings within the existing sidewalks that are there, to not only illuminate the sidewalk and walking path, but also the streets as well.
and the decorative lighting would go how far?
Up to the 18th to 19th Street area, to where the existing decorative lights are.
So you're gonna replace those ones that you just got 8 years ago, or you're?
No, I mean, those would stay. The decorative lights that are up on 18th and 19th, they would stay. And we would follow
Like
through, kind of like
17th Street?
we would just follow that through from 6th all the way in. And that would tie all the way down into the downtown area as we finish up the Chadburn Streetscape, you know, that goes from the Concho River all the way up to basically Fifth or the curve up there to US 67.
When everybody's through, I have a question. I don't want to interrupt anybody. I want everybody to go first before I go.
Anybody else?
Got any questions?
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Stephen.
All right, where are the pavers going to be? What area, in what areas?
I am not a proponent of the pavers because they are an extreme,
That's right.
they are, I mean, from a maintenance standpoint, they are high maintenance. You have a lot of spraying that has to happen, a
That's
lot of
why I
weeding
asked
that has to happen.
You're not going to use.
I am not proposing to utilize any pavers.
Sidewalk's going to be concrete.
Yes, we would utilize a concrete sidewalk and not the pavers. Again, you can tell where we do have those pavers from the old Freedom Grant project, and you can see all the grass and the weeds and stuff that grows up in those pavers. You can also see where, you know, if a car drives over it and it starts making depressions in it, then all of a sudden it starts breaking it up and disrupting them and stuff like that. So I am, from a maintenance perspective, I am not a proponent of placing pavers, decorative pavers within a streetscape.
In your street lighting cutouts, are you going to have any landscaping? I don't see any landscaping costs.
There is not any landscaping in here. We can put some minor landscaping in there, but again, I want to be very,
You're not going
I want to be very careful
You're not
about.
going to make a bunch of horseshoes with that.
Yeah, again, the more
You're not gonna interrupt traffic.
the more landscaping you have, the more, you know, issues you have, especially when you start getting into corners in your site triangles. So you have to watch those issues as well too. And again, the more landscaping you put in, the more maintenance that is on down the road. And so again, now.
I like the concept, but I'm going to remind everybody on this board that there's not a dime worth of enhancement of the tax base being spent right here. Now, it could be used as, you build it, they'll come, maybe that people will refurbish some things and make things a little nicer and improve the tax base. We're spending money that's not going to improve the tax base, which is the primary goal and objective of this board. Now, personally, I like it, but I'm not in favor of it because you've got the street lighting, the traffic signals in there, that shouldn't even be that should not be.
And again,
should not be a responsibility of this board.
No, okay,
The city's got
and that's
its own
fine.
capital improvement program, it can deal with the street lights.
No, I mean, and that's fine. This, again, we were asked what would we do to improve this area, and this is what we would do to improve this area.
And
so.
In context, this came out of the public meetings because there's $2 million in the North TIRZ zone that we don't have enough applications for, and the balance continues to grow. So out of that meeting, the question was put, I don't know if it was put to you directly, Shane, or how, but it was put, you know, what could the city do up there that could utilize some of those funds and make some improvements in the north zone? And this was one of the ideas that was put forward of a project like this. And I think the ultimate question the board has to decide is, you know, this is not what we have typically done. We typically don't, and all of these are things that, you know, the capital improvement plan and the city and its budget traditionally takes care of. So we would be paying for something that it would ordinarily go through another process and through this. Of course, all this has to be approved by city council anyway, but, and so this is different. And as Stephen correctly pointed out, it won't raise the property values of any of the properties that are along that street. I mean, it may over time, or it may encourage people to invest in their properties or to even put in for an application with the TIRZ in the future, but it doesn't do anything to raise property values or promote business other than just the general infrastructure of the street. So I think that's sort of a fundamental question. We haven't done that in the past. And do we want to do that now?
John Mark, you'll recall, because you were probably on the council when we did this, when the other project was done in the south, the city got significant grant money from the state. Has any grant money been sought for this project?
Not specifically for this project. Now, we do have in our CIP program, and it is funded through the bonding program, to redo North Chadbourne from 6th Street all the way to 43rd Street. And actually, a portion of that is going to reach down, and that's why we're working with TxDOT Rail, I mentioned earlier, on that Chadbourne, on that hard S-curve right there, and part of that drainage structure there. Part of that is going to be accompanying that north project, North Chadbourne project that's going to go all the way from there, all the way to 43rd Street. This kind of just coincides with it. We're going to do, you know, there's going to be some curbing, I mean, there is going to be some total recon, especially from 6th Street up to 14th Street, where it is so bad and there has been so much, so many utility digs in that area for so long that street's just gone there. And so that will be a total recon. There's going to be some reshaping of the road, things like that, to get our drainage back, do some things like that. So this just kind of coincides with that same project. That's one of the reasons.
When is that going to take place?
The actual construction documents are completed on the actual road portion of it itself. We are waiting again on TxDOT Rail and TxDOT right of way to see if we can get that S, because before I start, you know, tearing into TxDOT property, I really want their permission.
John, are you aware of any grants that might be available for this project? Have you explored or investigated to see what potential is there?
There are some grant programs out there. I believe the city is looking at those grant programs for some other projects. And so I think the short answer is we have not considered this one for any of those grant programs because we've got other projects we're pursuing those same grant programs. One of which being the Chadbourne project downtown, because, you know, we did phase 1 of that and there's 2 additional phases. And so I think that's been the focus.
We are going to apply for set-aside grants this December, and one of those is for Phase B of the Downtown Streetscape Project, which basically, hopefully will take it all the way from where we stopped at Beauregard, we'll take it all the way up to the railroad tracks. That's our goal, is to see if we can get enough set-aside funding through that grant process for that project. And there are 2 or 3 other projects as well that the city's applying for those same set-aside funds, grant funds for. We do have our eye on about, 15 different separate grants right now that we're looking at. And again, some of those are very specific as to what can be used for. A lot of sidewalk grants, but most of those are going to be more of your Safer House to School, Safer House to Park type grants, to where they're more specific than just general other grants. There are some larger federal grants coming down out of the out of the last transportation bill and the infrastructure bill. The biggest issue that we've seen with some of those, most of those are large dollar grants, where they want to see 20, 30 plus million type projects, and then those are a 50-50 match. So that's kind of where it starts hurting us.
Shane, does the old state topics program is still in effect?
Those, no.
They gone away?
Yeah, I mean, it's all in their nomenclature, even from 4 or 5 years ago, it's all changing, and actually how they're actually funding these grants now, and kind of what their strategic priorities are.
Let's kind of get back on track as far as the question that this board has to answer. And I guess I would like to just go around and get some thoughts from everyone, hear everyone's opinion on, you know, is this something you're interested in pursuing, even if this isn't exactly what you want to do? You know, I mean, putting money into infrastructure like this for the north zone is a way to use some of the north funds. So,
I like the project except for the traffic signal. I don't know.
Okay. So you're okay with doing a project like this with TIRZ funds?
It's not being spent anyways.
Okay, that's one way to look at it. Tony?
I'm still not convinced this is the top priority that we have, you know.
Okay.
You know, it's good that we're exploring all the avenues that we have, but I'm not convinced this is a top priority for us right now.
I forgot to introduce our new member, Ryan Newland, here today at the beginning of the meeting. I'm so sorry, Ryan. And I know you may not, this is your first meeting, so if you have any thoughts on it, go ahead, share those.
My initial thought is.
You turned it off? Oh, there you go. There you go.
My initial thought is that, you know, some of the same things that have been said here, that doesn't make sense for the traffic light. I guess I'm sitting here for the day one and listening to everyone talk. I'm optimistic that there's a way to get businesses to take advantage of the money and increase the tax base, the reason the board's here in the first place. 6 months from now, I might be, you know.
Yeah, in a different.
Correct, so.
Anything?
I think if the city staff comes to us and has a viable grant potential that we can plant, that gives us good seed to start this project, I'd be for it. Otherwise, I'm against it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that it goes back to our you know, what we're here for. I'd be curious to see if we think that the South Chadburn streetscape help spur any businesses along there, once we did it, to come with applications, or have we seen an increase in those building values, or them moving from being vacant into an occupancy? I'd be curious to see that. I know it's probably too soon maybe to really see the impact of that. But I would, if we saw something that was definitive from that streetscape, I'd probably be more advantageous to go with something like this. But I still am on the edge of, if I just don't think that it's where our dollars spent. I understand we have money there, and we've got a lot of people having their own ideas of what to spend with it, but that, I think we got to be cautious with it too, and treat it with respect.
Greg?
I struggle spending it on money that's not bringing us in additional tax dollars and investments. I mean, it would look nice, and we just, it wasn't very long ago that they upgraded a bunch of the sidewalks right in front of us up to 14, and did that. I'm not real sure about the purpose of the new traffic signal, but I struggle spending the money on the same thing. I mean, it would look nice, but I agree, it's just struggle. It's our purpose to spend that money. So.
John, does that give you the direction? Enough direction? I think.
Well, it gives direction.
What I'm hearing is the board is not interested in funding this project, this particular project as it's presented. What I am hearing is that they would be open to considering, they may be open to considering contributing to a larger project, or with additional funding and other grants in the future. Is that, and if I've misstated that, what folks are thinking, then please correct me.
This does not require any action, but you could take a formal vote if you choose to, or it could just be direction.
I don't think we need to take a vote on it unless we're going. Go ahead.
Is the city council considering this as a project?
Well, that's a good question.
My understanding was this would be coming as a recommendation from the TIRZ Board to the city council.
That's correct. So if your direction is not to pursue it, I don't know if that's, I think the short answer is the city council could take it up anyway, if they chose to. So if a council person or the mayor requests it.
They'd have to have our recommendation on the utilization of TIRZ money, would they not?
Well, that's kind of a tricky question. We may have to get back to you with an answer. They don't have to follow your advice. The question is, do you all have to make a recommendation?
I think, for clarity, I'm gonna make a motion, and we can act on it or not act on it.
Okay.
That this be delayed and reconsidered only when the staff brings back a viable alternative to funding such as a federal or state grant.
Okay, so there's a motion made that we basically table this until such time as the staff comes back with the recommendation, including federal or state grant funding to assist.
I'll second that.
All right, second by Tony. Any discussion on the motion or questions? like you were gonna ask a question.
I'm just thinking, again, whether we spend $1 on it or 3 million, you know, does it go back to what this board is for? I mean, again, have we funded these in the past? I mean, I've heard some maybe prior in the past, a lot of no's though have come out of this in the past.
You know,
There have been, to answer that question, I'm sorry, Jason.
on that project, the transit, that little corner, they took a lot of money from the north. It was very upsetting. A lot of it contributed more to the south, but,
Well,
you know, so to answer your question, yes, they have taken money.
Well, and let me just say that this is an eligible expense, so I don't want anybody to think that it's not, that it's outside of the authorization of TIRZ per the state law. And we have done like the Chadburn project, the Freedom Grant, I believe, that included some TIRZ funds, if I'm remembering correctly. So you all can fund those projects. And what my earlier statement, this board has not been in favor of funding street projects, meaning pavement, curbs, that part of the street. But you have funded what I would call streetscaping projects with either landscaping, sidewalks, decorative lighting, that sort of thing. You also funded a similar project, very small project, but over by the YMCA there on Concho. So this board has funded that. That has not been the major focus. And I will say this board has been very hesitant about any of those projects, but you have funded them in the past.
well, just to clarify, do you have a question?
You also mentioned, you know, we're talking about tabling this, but you mentioned funding this over several years. Explain that.
Well, similar to what we had done with the South Chadburn project, how that was funded was this board and the city council ultimately approved a portion of funding every year on the South Chadburn, it was 8 years, which we're still in the middle of. So, and I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but a certain amount of funding was committed from this board for 8 years, so much each year. And so basically the way that worked is the city, through regular city funding, fronted the cost of that project, and the TIRZ is paying that back each year over those 8 years. This would be similar in that, you know, $1 million would come off the top, but then the remainder of it would come from TIRZ funding for subsequent 6 years.
But a key difference on that is that was part of the funding that the city was using.
Absolutely, it was part of a big grant.
So, and if there's any question, I just wanted to clarify that voting for this motion does nothing than to table it until such time as the city would come back with some more details about additional funding for this same project.
Well,
Which the board would still be able to vote up or down at that time if it wanted to.
Well, what that clarifies in my mind though is if you did it over 8 years, no matter how you if you took $1 million up front or if you didn't take anything up front, basically you're talking about nearly $400,000 a year, which is over half the TIRZ income a year for the next 8 years is what that would boil down to.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
But I'm fine with the motion, so.
One more question.
I'll call a question.
On all our
Oh,
projects.
one more question. Go ahead.
Does the engineering design on other projects that we've had passed, have they ever been in-house or we've always outsourced that?
It's some of both. I mean, Shane might be able to answer better, but I think recently most projects are designed outside. But I think smaller projects are sometimes designed in-house. But my understanding is larger projects like this are typically farmed out to outside design engineers.
There's been a motion to call the question. Is there a second on the motion to call the question?
Second.
Second by Stephen. Okay, what we're voting on right now is whether we're going to end debate on this topic and go ahead and vote. So if you want to end debate, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so now we're calling the question.
Before you do that, I didn't get who made that original motion.
Oh, Greg made the original motion.
Yeah. I made the first motion.
Stephen seconded it.
Right.
So
Okay.
now we're voting on Stephen's motion to table it until such time in the future as the staff comes with additional funding recommendations for such a project. And then we will consider it at that time. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
So I don't want to debate or anything, but I just want the board to think about this. They want to take $350,000 for the next 6 years from the north to help with a street project. 4 months ago, we were needing $60,000 to help a couple of other businesses in the south, and we couldn't do that. They did not even want to help. They just said, nope, I just want y'all to think about that. And those other businesses would have brought business to the south, tax revenue to the south, where the south needs it dearly, so.
That's right.
You know, this board voted to council to use the north funds for the south projects that went unfunded, like you said.
I appreciate the comment, but we're not going to retread that because it's not on the agenda, sorry. But the comment is fine. The comment is
Germane to
fine.
the issues.
We're going to move on then to item number 9, consideration of authorizing additional maintenance funds for a potential TIRZ maintenance contract to include maintenance of landscaping, weeds, trash pickup, and similar tasks to ensure aesthetic streetscapes along streets within the north and or south TIRZ area. And this is the one that I was mistaken on earlier. This is the one that everyone had some questions about.
Yeah, and this is the one that we discussed last time as well, so I won't go in great detail, but basically it's a proposal to fund maintenance, weeding, trash pickup, that sort of thing, along the Chadburn Street corridor. As you mentioned, there are some upfront costs of about $38,000, annual costs of about $62,000, and then it would be broken up between the north and south as a 37%, 63% split. And this is how that breaks down. And so you all had some questions. We have folks from Parks Department here. They put together these numbers, and you all had some questions about some of the costs. And I guess at this point, I would just defer to them for answering any questions that you may have about the specific proposal. Let me say before, I'm sorry to get there, this also came out of that discussion at the town halls of, we've got this money in the north, what are some things we could do with it? And as we looked around, we noticed driving around that there is trash. Some of the landscaping could use some maintenance, that sort of thing. And it's a fairly low amount of money that we're talking about. Overall, just $62,000 for the annual. Of course, that probably will increase a little each year, just as salaries go up and that sort of thing. But it would just have some dedicated people who, and there's a breakdown here, but weekly or monthly would come out, pick up trash along the roads, trim trees, trim the bushes, those sorts of things, just on a regular basis. I think part of y'all's question was, isn't that something the city regularly does? The short answer to that is yes, but not on the same schedule as this would do. And so the real question for you all is, are you willing to put money towards an enhanced effort to do that sort of maintenance of the streetscape over time?
How did you come up with the ratio split?
Basically, the length of the street that's the length of
the
Chadburn
south
in the
and the
north and in
north?
the south.
You mean most of that stuff is in the north? Most of the maintenance is going to occur in the north zone?
Well, I think initially, and again, the parks guys can answer that probably better than I can. The idea is this would be a longer term thing, but there would be a focus on the north as well.
Well, and one question I did have, and maybe you can deal with it, Roger, is does this include, but you've got the labor expenses in here, but are we talking about having to hire additional staff?
I'll defer to Roger.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Roger Havlock, Park Senior Manager. Sorry, I'm not feeling all that well today, but I'm going to try to make it through this. If not, I have my backup sitting right here.
Who is this? Who is this?
Roger Havlin.
What is he?
I mean, I don't know what his current position
I
is.
apologize if I didn't make enough copies.
Roger,
I think I
could you
made
just
8.
introduce yourself again and state your position again? Some people
Yes,
didn't
my
hear.
name is Roger Havlock. I'm the Park Senior Manager with the City of San Angelo.
The Parks
Senior Manager.
Senior Manager, okay.
So back in April of this year, we were approached by city management to come up with an annual maintenance plan as well as a budget for maintaining the sites, basically stretching from 19th Street to the Concho River. And so that's exactly what we did. Our proposal was submitted. The budget that we will go over shortly was adjusted after October 1 because we did get 7% pay increases, and so those numbers did change at that time, okay? So what I'd like to do, because I know there have been questions in past meetings about why are we asking for this much money, I'd like to go over in detail what those items are. And basically, this is what we feel is the appropriate maintenance that needs to take place at this site. We also feel that if you choose to lessen the amount of maintenance that we have listed, that whomever is charged with doing it will end up doing it probably this much or more. I've been in this for 16 years. I've seen it happen time and time again. And so that's the reason why we put as many services and things like that as we did, okay? So the first one that we have is 4 weekly trash services. As John pointed out, emptying trash receptacles, pickup and disposal of all loose trash. We looked at it from the standpoint of when we thought would be the most use, especially in the south zone where the newly developed area is, where the bars are, where the weekend crowd might be. So we looked at a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday of each week. Basically, that means one of our staff members would be on site from 19th Street all the way down to the Concho River, each one of these days. And we'll go over the timings here shortly. Number 2, it kind of goes along with what we do already in our park systems. When we do our daily maintenance with our area groundskeepers through those sites. So basically, in our park systems, we service those sites 365 days a year. And so we have people that go through, again, we call them area groundskeepers. They look for graffiti, safety issues. They pick up trash, clean restrooms, pull trash out of the trash barrels, get that hauled off, those types of things. So we looked at 4 weekly blowings and sweepings of that area. We looked at weekly weed control through the entirety of that site. As y'all pointed out earlier, and I believe Mr. Brown had pointed it out correctly, you get so much growth in between those pavers. We've noticed the same thing throughout that region, and so that's something that we know we would need to take care of. But weeding all the way through, you've got minor tree plant pruning, replacement of whatever plants die or get damaged throughout that area or become unsightly that would need to be replaced in an appropriate manner. You've got 1 heavy tree servicing, so basically it wouldn't just be this staff member that would be going through that area. When you start talking about heavy pruning, we would take our landscape maintenance staff through there with the appropriate equipment, try to do all of the pruning that needed to take place throughout that whole area, at least once a year in the appropriate time period of the fall, winter season. And then we'd have biweekly irrigation services throughout that site. Basically, anything that goes wrong with the irrigation system that currently exists, all the repairs that are needed, make sure that those plants are getting the appropriate amount of water from year to year. If you go to the next page, or the next set of pages, we're talking about maintenance cost. The first thing listed, it would be a new vehicle. And yes, to answer your question, Mr. Hogue, basically, so that we do not get the negative impact that we anticipate with this being added onto our plate, we would be looking for a new person or a new FTE, full-time employee or equivalent for this job. We're looking at a new vehicle. I know that Mr. Brown had pointed out in previous meetings about using possibly used vehicles. As manager of the Parks Division, I would never recommend that we go with any kind of used equipment. Unfortunately, I've been down that road as well over the last years, and they seem to be quite unreliable. So any of the equipment listed that you see, I would not recommend going in with any type of used, which includes the vehicle itself, going into it. And again, those are the non-reoccurring costs. That would be a one-time thing. The additional reoccurring cost, you can see there's some overtime put in. That's for the weekend work, holidays, things of that nature that we figured in. You've got irrigation water, custodial, general maintenance, equipment maintenance. We have a vehicle cost associated with fleet services. We have uniforms that we'd need to buy for that person. Botanical and ag is basically the fertilizer, the pesticides, any of the plant material, the replacement plant material that we need to provide for that area to put it back in its original state, whether it be trees, ornamental shrubs, ornamental plants, that type of thing. Safety supplies, fuel. And then on the last page, it kind of describes better the cost associated, or basically where did we get that dollar figure from that you can see on the board. So the trash service, the weed control, that type of thing, those 4 weekly services, if you look at 1 man-hour for 8 hours, times 32, which would be 32 man-hours per week, 52 weeks in a year, we're looking at about 1,664 man-hours. At the current rate, for that particular position, it's $23 an hour. For major annual pruning, we'd be bringing in our 3-man crew. For that, we're looking at 40 crew hours times $90 per crew hour for that crew, as well as the vehicle use and equipment use. That's $3,600. And for irrigation, again, those bi-weekly services, we looked at 104 crew hours times $65 per crew hour, which gets us to a total of $48,632. Again, we come to you not with any expectation. I come to you basically saying, this is what I need. It's the exact same type of thing that I've told city management, that if we're going to be given or charged with taking care of this site, it is in the best interest of the city that we obtain another full-time employee so that it does not negatively impact what we do in all of the other sites that we do throughout town. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions that you might have about what we have put together.
Any questions for Mr. Hadwood?
So when you say the Concho River, are you saying all the way to Avenue A, or how is that working like?
Basically where, is that Twisted Route that's right there at the end, where that new ramp going down into the Neffs area? Basically to the Concho River on Chadburn Street, all the way to 19th Street.
So south is taking care of Twisted Route to, what, 6th Street, or?
That sounds correct to me. I looked at it.
It's about 3rd, and it actually, on one side of the street, it's 3rd, and the other side is 4th, but it's right in that area.
So, the north does have a longer stretch.
Yeah, we estimated about a 70-30 split from our staff standpoint in terms of 70% on the south and 30% on the north. But again, it kind of depends on what type of improvements that Shane was talking about that may come into the future. This is not a one-year thing. This is something that we would basically be doing year in, year out into the future. And I think to do it correctly, if I was a contractor and not a city employee, this is the type of thing that I would be submitting to whatever entity that may be paying the bill for it. But I just wanted to give you kind of a snapshot of where we're at and what our needs are.
Did I understand that you're not hiring any additional personnel? Is that
Yes, with the funds that I would receive, Mr. Brown, my goal would be to get a new full-time employee that would be dedicated to this site. Now, when I say dedicated, what I actually, and I apologize if I'm using the wrong term, they would be prioritized for that site. In other words, their daily task on the days that we have on that sheet would be, you do that, and you get that.
You're going to do one full FTE?
That's what I'm going after, yes, sir. As well as the equipment that we feel is needed to do the appropriate job going through
I can't
that.
believe the Parks Department doesn't have that equipment already. You already got that.
We do, but it's in use with all of the other staff that we have.
And I don't question, I mean, if I was in your shoes, I'd be doing the same thing. I mean, my question to you is, where is the preponderance of time going to be spent, in the south or the north part of the zone?
That's what I made mention to Mr. Brown. In my opinion, our staff's opinion, it's going to be about 70% in the south and about 30% in the north.
That's what I thought. And I don't qualify.
That's just reality.
That's appropriate, yeah.
And so what that might mean for your funding, I think, Roger, if you could move me back a slide, I think you've got the clicker up there.
And John just mentioned for the board that the South's gonna get another
Yeah.
$470,000 or $80,000, maybe close to $500,000 this year. And the South is gonna account for about 70% of the workload of the maintenance that needs to be done. And I don't question it needs to be done. So all I'm saying is there needs to be a redivision of the South money being paid for it and not robbing and piggybacking on the North.
And that's what I was about to say, is that our staff, when we did this split, we looked at the length of Chadburn Street that's in the north versus south. And so that's where this proposal on the screen came from. Now, if
I know
Roger's
where the
saying.
work's gonna be, and he just verified it.
Right, and if Roger's saying it's more like 70-30, 70 in the south, then if you all decide to fund this, you may want to take that into consideration in terms of your recommendation of what percent comes from the north funds and
I
what
think it
from the
needs to be
south.
done, and I'm gonna make a motion, we approve it, provided that 70% of all the funds being utilized come from the South.
There's a motion on the table to approve it with the proviso that 70% of the funds come from the south tiers and 30% from the north. Is there a second to that motion?
I will say, well, obviously, we're in favor of it, and I think it's gonna help a lot of businesses, especially cleaning up the north. You know, if the north sees that, man, like, the city's really get involved, you know, cleaning up streetscaping, let's try to get those buildings occupied, let's try to get them, you know, going. I do agree with Mr. Brown, I think the south needs to contribute a little bit more, especially since they'll be getting the attention. I don't know if y'all, I mean.
Well, right now, we don't have a second.
Yeah, Mr. Real seconded.
Okay, Tony seconded? Okay, I'm sorry.
One of the things that I failed to mention too, sir, is just the sheer fact that this does not include the Houston Hart Highway 67, since that's TxDOT property. So I would have to defer to Shane if he's still here, if he wanted to visit about that and that. I know we did not figure that in what we thought would be the scope of work, just because of the fact of the ownership of that, or the right of way for that.
That's where I would like for y'all to focus more, because, you know, that's the entrance to downtown, that's the entrance over there, and it's just.
It's where they're, and for the next several years, that's where the primary maintenance is gonna occur until something develops north of the railroad tracks here.
That's at current, not if we switch the funds. The South is responsible for 5% of their budget goes to maintenance of the area that brings in zero tax dollars. I mean, I'm more for the streetscape than I am for the maintenance of it. Maintenance of this needs to be the business owners in front of their property, plus the city already has funding for it. I think even if we double it, you're looking at almost 10% of the budget from the South goes to maintaining the Chadburn Street, basically. We have businesses in the South that get turned down for funding that want to open businesses. I don't think this is money well spent, in my opinion.
Greg? Any comments or questions?
Call for the question.
You call the question? There's a motion, there's a call for the question. Is there a second? Second? Was that Tony? All right. All those in favor for putting it to a vote, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay?
Nay.
Let's kind of make sure we have the two who voted aye, or Tony, Stephen. Those who voted nay was myself, Brian, and Jason, and Ryan. Any other votes? The motion doesn't carry, so discussion will continue forward. The motion is still on the floor. My one comment on it is similar to when we had the discussion on the prior item, which is similar to what Brian was saying, is, again, you know, if we're looking at it fundamentally as this is something that falls within the ordinary city budget and maintenance and those sorts of things, this is not something special, and it doesn't increase the property values. And I don't know if I'm assuming Brian's numbers are correct about how much it would reduce funds available in the south. I think that's a concern, and I think it just kind of comes back to the philosophy of, do you want to be putting money into businesses, or do you want to be putting money into maintenance and infrastructure issues in those areas, both of which are completely legitimate. So I have some concerns about this project, as I did the last one, for my own purposes. But is there any other discussion or comments? All right, then we'll put it to a vote if there's no other discussion or comments. All those the motion on the table, just to clarify, is that we approve this this project, the maintenance project, but with the change that 70% of the funds come from the south zone and 30% from the north. Did I correctly state that?
That's correct.
All right. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All those opposed? No?
No.
Nay. Nays have it. We will not be funding this project.
Just too much money out of the south.
All right. Director's report. Anything additional than what you've already
Nothing
stated?
additional, no.
Okay,
You mean we're not gonna fund it at all?
I actually do have
that's what we just voted.
on the next item of your next scheduled meeting, I will note that that is scheduled for the Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. We would typically move that meeting, although in most recent years, we've simply canceled the November meeting. So unless you all have a particular recommendation, we may just see how it goes. At the moment, we don't have any current items for that agenda, so our preference, unless something else comes up, would be simply to cancel the November meeting rather than trying to move it. But I'll defer to the board if you all have particular recommendation on that.
Anyone have any
I mean,
heartburn?
we're within application time. I don't know, in the past, November seems to be, it would be a pretty busy month for us, but
No, typically our cycle, for the south in particular, applications aren't due until November 30th.
Okay.
So there would be we wouldn't have any applications to review at that meeting anyway.
Okay. I think then, if the consensus of the board is we can just cancel the November meeting and everybody have a happy Thanksgiving. If that sounds good. All right. And I don't have any future agenda items other than the ones we just talked about to bring back for the next meeting anyway.
Right.
So does anyone else have any future agenda items they want to discuss? Which our next meeting will not be until, I guess, December.
That's right.
Hearing none.
I do want you to reach out, maybe if you could reach out to those applicants that we denied, or, just let them know that we have funds available, and if there's a way we could probably get them ahead of the,
And just to be clear, if they got denied last year, they have to start the application process completely over?
That's correct. And now they could, the application's filled out, they could
resubmit
resubmit
it,
their same packet from last
Okay.
time.
All right. There being nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn was second by Brian, second by Jason. All those in favor say yes.
Yes. So, Mr. Chairman,